So we've talked about obviously legacy and heritage environments. So in terms of people starting to tackle their portfolio and just understand the likelihood of success in implementing kind of zero trust environments. We know that modern cloud native applications and a lot of the SaaS stuff will happily support zero trust model. In my experience as application architect formula, anything that's stateless and doesn't actually have to remember what's going on at the time, generally quite good for a zero trust model, which describes exactly none of the public sector applications they ever use. So in terms of starting to diagnose your portfolio and kind of work out where zero trust can be an easy win, where you can implement it uniquely, and where it's going to require doing some rebuilding. What kind of frameworks, what kind of principles you both find, what have you seen people do in terms of actually trying to finalise where things stand?
In terms of support for legacy applications particularly? Yes. Okay. So I think it is perhaps a misunderstanding that I've got legacy applications, I can't implement zero trust principles because none of the infrastructure I have, or certain parts of the infrastructure I have, don't support possibly even radius in certain cases. So I have no way of hooking into these identity access management models. I have no way of proving identity from the application platforms themselves. I'm going to be careful not to name names, but we've done a lot of work in the finance sector, and one might be horrified to realise how many core applications are still running on legacy green screen 3270 S400s, VMS type stuff, and I've even seen an HP 3000 kicking around. And they just don't know how to get rid of it. Right? These are core banking applications that are sat in a data center somewhere, and occasionally they'll wheel in a 70-year-old consultant who's long retired to tap the hammer in the right place of the machine and make it work again. And the perception is, and of course, regulatory compliance starts to bite down on this, and Swift is saying, well, hang on a minute, you need multi-factor authentication around these core applications. You need a way of implementing increasingly zero trust principles. We're actually getting regulators now, especially in the US, saying zero trust is a condition that you need to meet. We're getting insurance companies saying the same thing, by the way. If you don't pursue zero trust principles, your insurance is going to be higher or not offered at all. We have the federal government in the US saying that if you want to, mandating the federal government have to implement zero trust principles. So this is a cold that America has that we're all going to catch. Right? Digressing a little bit, the reality is you can implement zero trust principles into legacy applications. You just need the right tools. There are many available to enable that. And you need to protect them in the right way with the right policy enforcement points. You can still implement zero trust principles. So if I'm accessing the core banking application, I have to prove who I am. I have to provide step-up authentication. I have to, as soon as I open my terminal emulator, then these principles are being applied. Checking against the control plane, and that's another important factor to separate the control plane from the data plane. Checking with the control plane, this person is performing this act, what conditions need to be in place before I give them access to that legacy system. So it is entirely doable to implement zero trust principles around legacy stuff.
Lovely, thank you. And John, once kind of the journey that you've had and met, how have you kind of prioritised where was easiest to implement it versus where was most valuable?
So I think you said it originally in your question around, you looked at legacy and you've got, SaaS-based services or cloud-based services. So from a cloud, be it Azure, GCP, AWS, that's reasonably easy to do. You've got loads of hookings and, capability in those environments. But from a legacy sort of perspective, for us, I think the biggest thing is actually understanding the data that sits behind the application. And another big thing is, and it's mentioned in the strategies, is the rationalisation of the identity stores. So the validation of an identity. You've got an application stack that runs its own AD, as an example, that isn't part of your standard AD. So you've got this kind of pygmy thing running in your kind of legacy layer. So you've got to understand actually, right, I can get either hook that into something else, or basically do I surface those identities? So that's part of that rationalization piece, and I think that's part of a bigger journey. And then I think that because for us, the difficulty, there's a legacy application stack. For us, there's also different classifications of data, which make that even, that makes it even more difficult. So I think kind of a rationalization of the identity piece, and then understanding the data pieces, and then working out actually which are probably the easiest things to tackle. Because as you'll remember from your days, we've got a heritage stack, as we used to call it.
So valued and a great deal of history.